Hi all, welcome to Couch Potato Reviews. Today I will be talking about cinematic adaptations of various novels and plays before talking about my take on the latest Adipurush teaser.
आ रहा हूं अधर्म का विध्वंस करने।
Let us take Romeo and Juliet for instance. It is the greatest love story ever written by William Shakespeare. Now, there are a lot of adaptations of Romeo and Juliet over these years. I'll be talking about three particular adaptations in Bollywood: Ishaqzade, Isak, and Goliyon Ka Rasila Ramleela. Now, all these three movies are the adaptation of the same Romeo and Juliet, and they have been released in this order. First Ishaqzade came, then Isak came, and then Goliyon Ka Rasila Ramleela. Now, if you actually see the success that each of these films have received, it's on a different scale. Goliyon Ka Rasila Ramleela, even though it was released later as opposed to the first two films, it had a higher pinnacle of success. Have you ever wondered why this is? We'll be looking at some factors that help adaptations of famous novels and plays. Mythological stories such as Ramayana and Mahabharata were bedtime stories, are bedtime stories, and will be bedtime stories. So when we were children, when we listened to these stories such as Ramayana and Mahabharata, we had certain visuals that were imprinted in our heads in terms of Hanuman will be like this from Ramayana, Shakuni will be like this from Mahabharata, and thanks to Amar Chitrakatha, these visuals were bolstered further in our head. So when it comes to these cinematic adaptations, it's very important that it exceeds our visuals and our imagination. So let's take Rajniti for example. Rajniti, directed by Prakash Jha. It is actually a modern rendition of Mahabharata in a political backdrop. That's very interesting because they've taken an old story and put it in a new setting, and then it just sort of enhanced the experience completely, even though we were familiar with the characters, because it is sort of a old wine in a new bottle. It was very fun and interesting to watch. Similarly, in the Adipurush teaser, I saw in one of the clips where Saif Ali Khan is walking, he plays Ravan's character, and Ravan's character is very similar to one of those characters from Thor Ragnarok. And I thought that would be very interesting if they had actually adapted this whole Adipurush as a cyberpunk and a futuristic setup. That would be very interesting to watch, and that would have been an interesting adaptation as opposed to the very traditional setup that is also showcased in the teaser. When we are usually dealing with mythological dramas or even historical dramas for that matter of fact, there will be various adaptations, and it's possible that one particular adaptation will cast such a long shadow that the other adaptations will always end up falling short. So let's take the very recently released Prithviraj Chauhan biopic. So that was based on Prithviraj Chauhan's story, but there was also a TV series where Rajat Tokas sort of embodied and sort of lived the character of Prithviraj, and after that no one can see anyone else as Prithviraj. So that was such a long shadow, and Akshay Kumar's movie couldn't step out of that shadow, and that is a problem with Adipurush, I feel, because when I close my eyes and I think of Ramayana, I only think of Arun Govil, and when I close my eyes and I think of Hanuman, I only think of Dara Singh. And that sort of rendition, I rewatched the Ramayana during lockdown, because that is something that is quite timeless, and when you have a timeless classic like that, it casts such a long shadow that Adipurush might end up falling short, according to me. And the teaser was quite underwhelming when it comes to matching the visuals of the original Ramayana TV series as well. Like I said before, because mythologies such as Ramayana and Mahabharata were bedtime stories and we have a childhood with those stories, the visual aspect of such stories is very important, because we have such grand visuals, because our imagination, the sky is the limit. Hence, we have such grand visuals ourselves, and that's the reason it's very important that the visual representation of this really matches our expectation. So when it comes to visuals, I think there are two parts of it. One is the setup in terms of the art that they have set up in terms of the set pieces, etc. That's the art director's job, and the other one is the VFX and the visual effects. Now there's a slow transition, I believe, from how they used to set up these, construct these big sets, as opposed to now just using green screen, and then us using the imagination in terms of the actors at least use the imagination in terms of this is where the door is going to be, this is where the window is going to be, etc. So that is purely dependent on the budget. I believe that the visual effects and the budget go hand in hand, and when I particularly think of grandeur, even it's not Bahubali. Even before Bahubali, I believe that Jodha Akbar is a great testament to how they have just brilliantly shot the movie. It was very smart filmmaking. If you actually observe, when it comes to the so-called VFX sequences, there's some fights in the beginning that might have employed VFX, and there's some fights towards the end. But in between, everything is just shot in a palace, indoors, and that is very brilliant because that's a very zoomed in version, and it's also easy for us to travel with the story, and it's also, the budget is also taken care of when it comes to that. And then right now, because the audience sort of expects, from Jodha Akbar till now, the audience has also grown, VFX has also grown, and now the audience is tampered and pampered also. So we expect high visuals. So when we looked at the monkeys in Adipurush, we expect them to look like the Planet of the Apes monkeys and not a cartoonish monkey. So when I saw the trailer, I felt like it was like those old Disney movies where you had humans also, you had cartoons also in one screen. So this could be deemed as a step back. And one more thing, if you observe, Hanuman is actually a human dressed as Hanuman, and the other monkeys are, VFX monkeys. So that also is slightly like, I would say kind of jarring, is what I personally felt. When it comes to such movies that have very grand scale, I think time and is very important. The time that you take to shoot the movie. So let's take Ponniyin Selvan for example. That just released few days back. It was shot, everything was shot in 160 days, and I personally like the way the movie has ended up, if you ask me, because there was more focus on the story. The visual effects and the set pieces is just a way to communicate the story. It's not the best, but it's not the worst also. So it's just very important to release, and you have this, most of the filmmakers, I think, get sucked into a vortex where in the name of perfection they take more time. Brahmastra is such a case, right? If Brahmastra had actually released many years ago, we would have already been in the third part of the trilogy by now, and that he could have just made it better and better and better, like how Rajamouli sort of evolved by taking one film, like the Magadhira graphics are very average. After that Bahubali, after that Iga, and then after that Bahubali. So you evolve with time, you experiment, and it's always good to have fast failures as opposed to prolonged failures. So that's my take, and I feel that Adipurush, in terms of time that it's been taking, etc., etc., and after taking so much time, seeing a teaser like this, the audience will be slightly underwhelmed. So that's my take, guys. That's my take on the whole Adipurush teaser. Hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more such videos.